Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well from wherever you are. My name is Daria Hupov, and welcome to the very first panel of the Galactic Imaginarium Film Festival. And today we're going to talk about advances in fantasy and science fiction's visual effects. Together with me at this panel, we have James Uren, who is the technical director at Moses Engineering, which is an award-winning, world-renowned manufacturer of virtual production solutions and camera robotics for film, high-end television, and broadcast. And together with him, we have Dan May, who is the co-founder of Painting Practice, an award-winning design studio working across film, television, and advertising. Hello, guys. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hello.
Hi, good to be here.
So I think we should start with talking about what your jobs entail. So we'll start with James right now. Tell us more about what your work at Moses entails.
Sure. So Moses do kind of three things, really. The first one is we do robotics for film and television. So that's normally robots that support the camera in some way. So that can be robotic heads or robotic arms, jibs, cranes. Then we do camera tracking, which is an important part of virtual production and modern visual effects. That's about figuring out exactly where the camera is inside the studio. And the last thing is we do virtual production software. So we do software that works with the Unreal Engine to allow people on set to preview the visual effects that they're doing in their film or TV show. So that's what Moses does, and I'm the technical director, and I also spend quite a lot of my time on set, normally about 4 to 6 weeks a year as a virtual production supervisor. I'm actually on location right now. I'm in Krakow or near Krakow in Poland, on a stage here preparing for a film shoot.
Well, thank you so much for coming, because I know you're a very busy guy. And then tell us about your role. I know from your website that you wear many hats. You're a designer, you're an art director, you're a VFX artist. But tell us, like, broadly, what do you do in your work?
Part of the role swapping through my career has been through setting up the company and trying to figure out what we do and how we could help various departments. We're still figuring that out, to be honest, in terms of the way that technology is moving on has tended to change the way that certain film departments interact with one another. Our primary kind of goal really is to sort of join up the design and art, the traditional world of the art department and the more sort of technical world of the VFX. They broadly have to work together, but one starts at the beginning and one finishes at the end, and they rarely overlap. And our company was sort of set up to be across the design process as much as possible from start to finish. And on that journey, I've sort of done various roles, like you say, through part discovery, part out of interest, part out of just needing to fill that role on the particular show that I was doing at the time. I'm still sort of trying to make up my mind as to where I end up, whether it's more in VFX or more in design. I've sort of figured things out. My favorite kind of projects are the ones that are quite VFX savvy or heavy, with a big design sort of creativity attached to it. So that's us really. And we're quite a reasonable sized team now of kind of mixture of previs artists, CG generalists, and concept artists.
That's great. Like, VFX is such a vast domain. There's so many things it can do, and it's very hard to pick a niche that you would find to be most passionate about. Before we continue, I want to just tell everybody who's watching, if they have any questions, they can write it down in the chat, and we'll try to get into those. But now, to get more into depth in the technology that you're using, James, can you talk a bit more about the technology you use at Moses? And if you want, I can roll the VT in the background if you think that's appropriate now.
Sure, yeah, go for it, yeah. So the main thing that we're trying to achieve, and I think that Dan and I share this, is bringing some of those creative decisions back to the set, or even before the shoot is happening. So and not leaving the creative VFX process until the end. So what you're seeing in this video now is a little bit choppy for me. I hope it's clearer for others. Perhaps we post the video in the chat for people to watch it. But what you're seeing here is our tracking system on top of, in this case, it's actually a stereo camera. So doing 3D here as well. Yeah, this is an example where the camera is moving freely around inside this green studio. And by having our tracking system on top of that, we can figure out where the camera is, and then we can use real-time computer graphics systems like the Unreal Engine to generate a real-time version of the visual effect. So why this is important and useful is it allows the creative team to see what it's going to look like. They're not just staring at green screens anymore. They're looking at a live composite, we call it. So it's a live version of what the CG visual effect will be in the end. So you can see the little tracking unit on top of the system there, and here you can see we're actually compositing this person into the car. There's the final shot after it's been through a visual effects process. But we're providing those tools to people on set, and that means that they have more control. They're making the decisions alongside the other departments, like Dan mentioned, with set design and props and costume. And the other sort of benefit is that with lighting, we can actually light the subject in such a way that they feel bedded into that virtual world that we're perhaps putting them into. So in a way, our kind of bringing this technology onto set allows us to do live visual effects. And where this crosses over with what Dan does, Dan actually is building, well, often does a lot of things, but often building some of these scenes as part of a pre-visualization process. And so we can, and he even uses sometimes the same technology, the Unreal Engine, to do this. So we can actually put those two things together now, and that's what Dan and I have been doing recently on a recent production. I don't know if you want to talk, Dan, a little bit about the previous side of things.
Yeah. Is there a specific question, or just broadly about it?
Yeah. Well, some of the people here might not know what previs is. So can you please talk about what it actually means, and
Sure.
why is it so important to use pre-visualization?
Well, I mean, previs is really moving storyboards. So over time, it sort of became, as soon as computer animation sort of took over from storyboarding, in fact, storyboarding is still widely done, and we use storyboarding a lot, especially like very quick thumbnail boarding. But pre-visualization is, I suppose, a more sophisticated version of storyboards. So it's taking the original storyboard panels and then bringing them to life with animation. And then the more technical, or the more budget, or the more sophisticated you want to be, you can bring in real lenses, real cameras. You can also start to pre-plan the gripping equipment you might use, and calculate the speeds that the camera might need to go at, or if the shots are particularly complex that might need multiple passes, you might need to use motion control, which is what that video had in there. So you had to do a particular couple of composites. The pre-visualization is kind of a broad term, really, because there is, and it almost overlaps into everything, because we use visual development is a common term now for kind of concept art, but pre-visualization and visual development for me are kind of hand in hand. You want to design environments that will work for the previs, and the previs also needs to work for the environment. So unfortunately, a good and a bad thing. Previs often needs a lot of kind of key creative stakeholders to be involved in the process. And some parties tend not to like it for various different reasons. Or they've had bad experiences with it, or they like to be a bit more organic on set, or they're not ready to commit, or you can do a certain amount of previs, but you really don't know what the talent or the actors are going to do on the day, or they might change their mind in terms of what blocking they might do unless it's something very specific. So I've learned, now that I've been doing previs for like nearly 20 odd years, that you need to be quite nimble and also flexible in your approach to previs, about what you're going to use it for, how much you're going to use it for, which style of previs you're going to use, because you can present many different sorts of looks of previs, from like 2D cartoon through to a really full-on 3D finished sort of article that you can now do in Unreal. So yeah, it's a very broad term, and there's like and it has many uses. I'm a huge fan of it, but you have to have the key people coming along for the ride, otherwise it becomes quite challenging. It's always worth doing, because I think it's always worth having a plan to work to in the background, because you can always go back to it if various parties deviate from that plan for good and bad reasons. You've got sort of some planning to work out VFX costs, or you can often end up using some parts of it in editorial and post-viz, which is the kind of post-production version of previs. I hope that answers the question.
No, that does actually answer the question. That's very interesting. I have a question here from Darius, where it says, what is the economy in terms of time and money when you use previs? I assume that means if you like, do you save time, or do you know, how much does it cost compared to other types of visual effects?
That's a good question. I mean, it's hard to quantify really, like how much you save from you doing previs. I think it's more sort of pertinent to say that if you don't do previs and you have a highly complicated visual effects sequence, it can cost you a lot of money. That's my take on it. I think previs shouldn't cost too much of the budget, because you need to put the money on the screen, like with most things. I try to do it in a percentage point these days, in terms of, if we've got a total VFX budget, I would allow between 5 and 10% for like design and planning of the budget, you know, of that budget. So if you take a particular shot that's going to be complicated, I'd allow at least 10% to basically use to work that shot out, whether that's doing testing, doing some previs, visual development, various things. Because I mean, you could spend more than that depending on how complicated it is, but for me that feels like a good starting point. So yeah, that's how I do it. In terms of then it's difficult to pinpoint a specific case in terms of like money and stuff. It costs, like most things, you have to have a series of people that are reasonably talented to work on it for a number of days. Sometimes it's dictated to by the fact that the project's come to you late and you've only got a certain amount of time to do it. There's also like a sweet spot when you do the previs. You really, for me, the previs needs to be done ahead of too much of the set design and planning, so that the set design could be worked to the previs in certain circumstances, so that anything that becomes key to the sequence, whether it's a lighting or a camera move that the director wants to do, the art department have had plenty of notice on building the set to be able to provide those things. You can do it afterwards. So obviously, if it's a big, if it's a creature thing or a complicated fight sequence, for example, you might just make the set, and it can be whatever the production designer wants the set to be, and then you will model up that set at the point of you starting the previs. So there's lots of different rules.
I think one of the things in terms of economy would be that often with these very complicated visual effects sequences, there's problems that have to be solved, and the on-set time is extremely expensive, right? So, you know, you've got lots of people there waiting around while that problem gets solved. Whereas with previs, you can solve a lot of those problems ahead of time in a cheap meeting room somewhere with a laptop, rather than have a full crew. I think that's probably, and that's why it's worth, you know, giving 5 or 10% of your visual effects budget over to that, because you save that on-set time.
That is very fascinating, and it seems like it's very complex. So my next question for you would be, how do we train the next generation for this sort of work? James, maybe you have something to say about this?
Yes, well, I mean, there's a lot of combined skills that go into this kind of work. So I think you know, the big thing is it's a massive team, you know, so, and those team members are all bringing different skills. So you have the engineering side of things, so software and computer and systems engineering, which is our kind of end of things, and then you have kind of craft practitioners who are operating specific equipment like cameras and things like that, and lighting, and then you have 3D art and creative end of things as well. And I think the routes into those are all quite different for, you know, people wanting to get into visual effects. I don't know if I missed something there, Dan, probably. I suppose there's also the kind of production side of things in terms of VFX production and organization and management. So I suppose, you know, from my end of things, on the technical side of things, what we're looking for when we're you know, looking for people with who want to become, for example, a virtual production operator on set, is somebody with strong problem solving and not necessarily hardcore engineering software development kind of thing, but certainly good problem solving, good communications, and also you know, the ability to you know, work under pressure sometimes, and also you know, operate the Unreal Engine, the 3D engine that we tend to use primarily for virtual production. So having those kinds of skills, it would be a really good starting point. And then there's a bunch of specific skills as well for people who want to transition into virtual production and visual effects from some other part of from, say, camera or something. We have something we call the Moses Academy, which is a series of training courses. We've got a little video on that I sent you, I think, Daria, we could run if you wanted. And this is for professionals who are already working in production and want to understand what virtual production is. And virtual production doesn't just mean visualizing visual effects on set. It can also be live broadcast virtual production, so you know, kind of virtual studios and things like that, or it can be the LED wall technology that we've seen emerging from The Mandalorian, where you have a big LED volume, we call them. It's massive LED panels that create a back projection behind the subject. They also create light onto the subject, the correct light, dynamic light, and you know, that's another really interesting virtual production technique. So yeah, I think there's it's a bit of a mixed bag, and that wasn't a very clear answer, but I think there's I don't know, Dan, if you want to add to that from your side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're this particular stage in the film industry with the advent of like virtual production and real-time rendering is, and also AI and various other tools that are becoming online. We're in this we're in a new phase, really. We're kind of in a new area where all the film departments are going to have to like certainly for certain types of shows and certain types of films where we have this scale and we have a lot of virtual and we have a lot of VFX work. We're kind of having to like recalibrate in terms of where all the overlaps are in the departments, and like who does what now and when. So I feel like it's going to be great if the film schools and all those kinds of places are going to be teaching virtual production and kind of the technical side of things, so that it's more widely known from all sides of the department. So if you're coming into film now, whether you're a grip or a cameraman or even a sound person, you have an understanding of this technology, so you understand like how you're going to interface with it and interact with it. Obviously, there are lots of different people that can work, whether it's environment designers or engineers or people that actually just run the screens. There are a lot of like new roles have been created. I think the major ones are kind of, I suppose the major creative ones are the ones about like how to. I mean, these are where the skill shortages are as well. Maybe also the technology certainly from a software side is still got ways to go to make it kind of like easy, but making kind of really spectacular environments that will run at 25 frames per second in Unreal is quite a challenge at the moment. So I think they're going to have to be quite specific trainings on that over time, so that those sort of artists are more out there, because I think there's definitely a skills gap in that area at the moment. But yeah, there are many new roles, and I think people are still figuring out how many roles there could be and whether they could be simplified somewhat. So if you're trying to do a virtual production shoot now, I think you need at least, in most cases, you need 4 to 5 different companies usually to make all the sort of parts come together, and that can be quite complex in an already complicated machine of a film or television program, because you're dealing with many moving parts, lots of budget issues, schedule issues, when the talent come on board, like creative things you're trying to solve. And then when you want to like add a sort of virtual production shoot onto that, even if it's just for some part of it, that involves bringing a lot of different companies and individuals together at usually quite a high expense. So if we could simplify the process overall and have it more broadly used, then that will be, easier for the most part for a lot, certainly for producers to understand and be able to deal with. Yeah,
there's 2 ways to address a skills gap, isn't there? There's either you train people to bring it in this end, or you smarten the technology to close the skills gap from the other side. And I think at Moses we're trying to do a bit of both.
I think we might have lost James at the moment, but that's all right, because you were speaking about how to train the next generation. I can share a video with you now from Moses Academy while we wait for James to get his connection back. So we will show it now.
I actually thought that this would be a great opportunity for me to learn about virtual productions. I just came here with an open mind, but actually what we received in return was a whole lot greater. I mean, the amount of information and the amount of practical work that we got to do was a whole lot, and it was worth it.
I've learned so much. From the basics of Unreal to, setting up this bad boy. It's been a great experience, and I've loved every second of it.
Even from, starting by putting the stickers on the roof, to the auto-aligning process, to mapping, when you kind of successfully finish it and you have this massive kind of architectural, it's almost like an architectural design, this thing that you've created is really fulfilling and really cool to look at. And then when you then apply that and connect the dots, and that works with Unreal and that works with everything else, it kind of feels like everything's falling into place. There's been a lot of hands-on experience, and we've really got to try out the equipment and get a good feel for how to actually use it, and I feel quite comfortable now saying that I could actually use the equipment in a scenario and get on with it.
Sorry, Daria, I think I lost my connection for a moment there. I don't know if you caught what I was saying.
It's all right, that's not a problem. We just showed everyone the Moses Academy video while we were waiting for you to come back. Yes.
And
so
I was just saying, sorry, I was just saying about Epic have lots of training. Did that message get through?
No, you can tell us more about it now if you want.
Just to say that the Unreal Engine is free to download, and there's loads of helpful online tutorials and videos, and Epic themselves run a lot of courses as well to sort of skill people up in Unreal, and it's really is a big part. It's the big tool that everybody is using in real-time visual effects right now. So yeah, it's great. It's free.
Yeah, this is the great thing about Unreal Engine that is free. So that kind of ties in with one of my other questions, which is how can independent filmmakers use this technology or similar technology to create visual effects in their productions?
Is that to me?
To either of you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, James or me?
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things about we like the fact that Unreal was free, and it was it's a term's used now, and I like it. It's democratizing the kind of creative process a bit. So obviously there are shows that have huge funds to do this sort of exploratory work, new technologies, and use some kind of expensive softwares. We work on some of those shows to a degree, and have the benefit of being able to do some of this stuff. But what we found in the past is to do some kind of like virtual camera things, or sort of things that will help the process look better overall, or kind of bring people into the creative process that even it's quite technical early doors. It was quite tricky to do that on a lowish budget, but with technologies improving all the time, and Epic Games being free, we were sort of able to, and also we got some funding through some various kind of initiatives, through kind of R&D initiatives, and Cluster, which was a Welsh fund for like new tech and sort of R&D process. We were able to develop a plugin ourselves for that, and also we have kind of a number of University of South Wales students working on the shows that we do in Cardiff. So we were able to give lots of work placements, and some of those work placements were kind of software developers, so that we were able to develop kind of a reasonably good and sort of solid plugin, which is still now being used and has been widely downloaded on the marketplace, which is a storyboarding tool and allows for sort of planning and stuff. So that sort of, if certain companies like us and other companies can do training or provide bits of software that kind of complement Epic Games kind of core software, then it does mean that if you've got a reasonably low budget, you can maybe push the boundaries of things that you wouldn't have necessarily tackled in the past. I mean, there's a lot of kind of affordable or free software now in lots of parts of the VFX industry, and you can get some of this equipment relatively inexpensively. Certainly, we've just invested in some camera equipment, some lenses are very kind of affordable comparative to some of the top end stuff, and you can still get some amazing looks out of those. So if you've got some money, you can do some great work now. As it is, if you're coming out of college or you're kind of breaking in, as long as you've got some time, or you've got some way of financing yourself whilst you create these projects, you can really push the envelope.
That was very interesting. James, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, yeah. Well, I was just going to say, a lot of the technology that we make is very specific, and it's for the high end, really. But there are alternatives that will get you a lot of the way there at consumer grade. So there's a tracking system called the Vive, HTC Vive tracker. It's a little puck you can put onto a sort of cheap camera, and that will get you tracking into Unreal. That will get you doing some basic virtual production. That's a really good way in. And in terms of the software to then combine the real and the virtual, we've actually made our part of that freely available as well. So that's something that you can download. We call it VP Pro, and we've made the sort of core of that freely available, again, to sort of help with training and to help people on more moderate budgets still get into virtual production.
That is very fascinating. We have some questions from our audience. So we have one question from Simona. It says, if you have to choose one single instrument, I assume she's referring to tool. So if you were to choose one tool to work with, which one would it be?
It would be the Unreal Engine for me, all the way. Yeah. I mean, of course, it's a massive toolbox that we have to reach into that has lots of tools for doing lots of different things. But the Unreal Engine is very is the power horse in the middle of that. Really, it's the engine that's doing all of the the grunt rendering and all the hard work, and it's extremely powerful and it's free.
Dan, what would be the tool you would work with if you would have to choose only one?
He's going to say a pencil, I reckon. Have we lost Dan?
I think we might have lost Dan.
Sorry, I mute myself.
It's all right.
I suppose if we only go allowed one tool, we'd need a camera. So yeah, I'd have to have a camera. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to film anything. So I'm not going to plug any camera make. Well, yeah, I would actually. I've just bought a Blackmagic camera because that's a very amazing camera for a moderate price range, and you can get lenses on it, and you can get an adapter for like 100 quid, so you can put proper film lenses on it for not very much money if you want to just rent them. So yeah, I think a camera. Although Unreal Engine would come a strong second, because then you can pretty much do anything with that. You can create environments now, light environments, play around, and then create virtual sets. So yeah, it's a fun tool to use as well if you're starting out on anything and you just want to jump into CG. I think Unreal Engine is a great place to start out with. Yeah.
We have one more question from Darius. He asks, when you develop new technologies, you need money to build and develop the tech, and that involves a lot of money. Where do you get that from? Do you get it from the company itself, or do you use investors' money?
So I can answer for Moses. Moses has grown for over 25 years. We've never actually taken any investment. We started off very small, building robots. In fact, our CEO, the first he actually started in special effects, so kind of doing kind of robots that flipped cars over and those kinds of things. And has, we've slowly kind of transitioned and grown over the last 25 years to now we're about 100 people worldwide with, and we work on many shows and are in many studios. Yeah.
Yeah, for us, I mean, we don't really need to, because we generally work on shows that have a budget, and we provide services to those shows for a budget. If we're doing any of our own R&D, we won't use too much of the show's budget to do that. We use second sort of funding bodies. We've had like investment from like things that we've acquired, like Cluster or other funds. The company itself now invests a little bit of its yearly budget in kind of like training and R&D ourselves, just because we feel it's an important part of the landscape that we're now in. I think you have to invest in sort of your own technology and your own workflows, otherwise you fall behind. So yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I would have one question for both of you, which is, what is the most exciting part of your job? Dan, maybe you want to start on this one?
Finishing it? No. No. I think, yeah, for me, the exciting period of time is the beginning of a project. So sometimes before we're actually in full-blown pre-production, we have a phase now. Well, often there's a phase when it's a very small group of people. The show has got just a script. Directors may or may not be attached, but we need to kind of create the world or the look of the production that we're about to start. So, and although there might be some kind of key sort of creative briefs from the production company they're working with, often we're trying to find the look and find the brief at that early stage. So you can kind of create. We do a lot of concept art, and there's a lot of free thinking, and you're trying to find something that will set yourself apart from other shows and have a bit of originality. So I'd say that phase of a show, before it becomes too kind of bogged down with the practicality and the budget and the method, that's the period of time I usually enjoy the most. So I'd say that, yeah.
James, what's the most exciting part about your job?
I think for me, I really like, because we build the technology, for me, it's seeing it all come together really is great. So, and having a few people who haven't seen live visual effects before come up behind you and tap you on the shoulder and look at your monitor and go, that looks great. And obviously we're leveraging on a lot of what you know, a lot of other people have done. You know, we don't do the design of the sets, we don't do the, you know, but we sort of bring all that together, and that's seeing that kind of all working as a technical sort of machine. I really like that part of the process. Yeah.
We have another question from the public asking, how can a small production company get to work with high-end, big budget films? They're asking for a friend, winky face. So do you have any tips on that?
Ooh.
I think that's tricky. Dan, do you want to?
It's quite a broad question. I don't really know. I mean, do great work, and then you'll be noticed by those bigger production companies. There is no easy path into the route of these things. It's a gradual step. I mean, I can only talk from my own experience. We've been much like Moses. Joel and I started from zero with no investment. We worked in. I mean, Joel was already fairly established, but I was sort of working as assistant, and then when I started the company, and we started working on various different things, from small commercials to sort of low and medium budget videos, and from there it kind of grew from strength to strength. Okay, we would get small bits helping kind of films do complicated things. No one, you know, at the time, no one really understood what we did. I spent most of my career trying to explain to people how our company works and some of the technologies that we use. And you have to have a lot of patience and perseverance, but you also just have to work really hard and have good ideas and not give up. I think, I mean, there's no route in, you just have to work really hard. So I think, I don't know if James, you want to add to that?
And I think you've got it all exactly right there. I think, you know, because we're not so much on the creative side, it's not so much about, you know, we're looking for people who have the right sort of sets of skills and things to do what we do. But what I see in the rest of the industry is very much people who have come from all different walks and through all different routes into those big creative roles. And you know, and I don't think there is any hard and fast rules either. I think just the whole definitely it works that if you do a great project, you know, you can use that as the springboard to the next project. That's definitely a consistent thing, I think. That so yeah, as Dan said, do great work which is no easy thing, of course.
I would have another question for the two of you. Is there any work that you are particularly proud of, and why? James, would you like to start on that?
We did a feature film. It was the first time I'd been on a feature film set. It was about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was something like a 10 million euro kind of not particularly VFX heavy film, but it had one sequence that was required a lot of visual effects, and yeah, and that was one of those situations where everything just came together really well, and it was a big success that sort of really springboarded probably quite a lot of everything we've done since, I would say. So that was probably a good moment. Yeah.
That's great. Dan, is there any work you are particularly proud of, and tell us why? I think you might be muted, Dan.
My son came in there, so I had to mute because he was talking to me.
Oh, it's all right. It's all
right. I think the first season of Black Mirror was one of my favorite moments in terms of hard work paying off to be a successful show in this particular genre that your festival is about, I suppose. Some of that was potluck. You know, we just started working on a show that no one had heard of, and we read the scripts and we thought they were amazing. And at the time, it didn't have a particularly strong budget, so we had to do some fairly clever thinking as to how we would execute it. And the second episode that I co-designed with my business partner Joel, and there wasn't really much VFX budget at all. There was a small graphics budget. So in that show, we had to do all of the design of the VFX really up front. similar to how The Mandalorian is now filmed. We had to design all the screens and all the graphics ahead of time, and we used this kind of journalist news timeline to play out the screens, and we used cameras above the set to watch what Daniel was doing in the set, and then had someone behind a very thin wall pressing buttons to cue the graphics to play out, so it gave the illusion that he was doing everything with these really sophisticated screens, when in actual fact it was just being kind of key punched and pre-made all the time. It also meant that we didn't have to do any keying, and all the lighting on Daniel was true, so there was no light, so it looked really, really good. Or it was incredibly stressful to make that show, but it kind of the reward was great, because it's still kind of widely accepted as a great piece of work.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker myself, so I too think that some of the most stressful work gets to be one of your proudest moments. Like, I don't know if I can do it right, but once you do it, you're very proud of the work you put in. I have one last question for you guys prepared here, which is, where do you see the field of virtual production and VFX going in the next 5 to 10 years, let's say? James, would you like to begin on that?
Who knows? I don't know. It's gone such a long way in the last 5 to 10 years. It's hard to say. I think that probably there's definitely an appetite from production and all of the team, that make a production happen, to see the visual effects happening, there on the set, be it with an LED wall or with previs or whatever. So I think probably the next 5 to 10 years looks like more of that, more visual effects happening on set, higher quality, more tools in the box that you can easily switch between. So different types of virtual production, green screen or AR or LED, we can easily hop between those technologies in order that you don't have this big slog of visual effects after the end of the production, and actually you get that instant feedback. I think that's probably the direction. Certainly that's what I hope is the direction, because that's the direction I'm headed.
Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, similarly, I mean, I'm a big fan of the MOSIS system, because it means that we're not, although I think the LED wall stuff is great and it's got huge potential, I still feel like it's a ways off delivering the sort of money savings and the production value it could give in the future. And then when the technology becomes more affordable for bigger studios and to be widely used by other companies, I think then that will be really exciting. For me, I think the big part of it as well is like trying to be a bit more sustainable and flying less and building smaller sets, and then using kind of green screen and virtual sets extensions to have a smaller carbon footprint. I think that's one of the things that we kind of have to do, really, if we're going to sort of survive, I suppose, as a human race. So I think the next 10 years are kind of pivotal for that. So yeah, leaning into this new tech to build less, fly less, and make better shows creatively is where I want it to be. I think it's not going away. It's just how quick it will grow and to what extent. James and I were talking about the whole stereoscopic thing the other day, IBC and the whole 3D thing. But I think with virtual production, I think that it's a tech that's here to stay. It's got too many uses, and it brings allows for lots of, especially with COVID and everyone having to be working in small groups and things like that, or being in or traveling less. It was kind of fast tracked through some of that. But there's not to say that we won't have something like that happen again, or we just want to travel less to save money or just to save the planet. So I think it will become more common. Who knows?
Well, we will wait and see what the future holds. But for now, I will say thank you so much to both of you for being part of this panel. I know you're both very busy, so we are very grateful. And thanks to everyone who has watched this live stream. And have fun in the rest of the festival, and we will see you around. Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.